Good evening and welcome all to the webinar today. We thank you all for making the time to join us. The topic for today is role of technology in the current academic session. You can post your questions in the questions box throughout the session and we would address the same as we move along with the session. We would want to make it as interactive as possible and would request you all to post as many questions you have. I would now hand over the call to Mr. Durga. Over to you, Durga.
Thank you so much, Rahul. Really appreciate that. And thank you everyone for joining this fireside chat. My name is Durga Prasad. I'm the host for today's session. I know it is difficult times for everyone and things are not same as before, but in spite of that, you chose to join this session, and which is truly remarkable, and we really appreciate that gesture. Thank you once again. So just a few things that Rahul called out already. Make sure that you make this session as live as possible. So if you have any questions, as and when these questions come up, so please post these questions on this question box on your window, so that I don't mind reducing my set of questions and give more of Ryan's and Jishan's time to you, asking those questions on top of your head. Okay. So before we get started, let me just go quick couple of introductions, and then we'll start the session. So first, let me talk briefly about Amazon Web Services. This session is actually delivered through AWS and Topper collaboration, along with Ryan Group as a guest speaker here. Amazon Web Services is an on-demand cloud computing platform where millions of customers across the globe actively use today to solve problems or create innovative solutions. In fact, over 14,000 academics institutions around the world use AWS. I mean, some of you may not be aware of it, but the hundreds of millions of students, educators, researchers in over 200 countries and territories use education technologies and online curriculum on AWS. So, in fact, the 19 out of 20 most well-funded US education technology startups actually use AWS today, including Civitas or Ecosystem, Coursera, Schoology. In India, Topper is one of the leading tech companies that we work with. Talking about today's topic, we have two guests here. So one is Ryan Pinto, the CEO of Ryan Group, one of the youngest entrepreneurs in the K-12 education sector. Ryan Pinto is the CEO of very successful and revered Ryan International Group of institutions. Under his leadership, Ryan Group has expanded in India and internationally to become one of the largest chains of private schools. He's an alumnus of Warwick University, Austin University, Birmingham, and Cass Business School, London. Welcome to the session, Ryan.
Thank you, Durga. Thank you so much.
So we also have another guest here, Jishan Hyatt, the CEO of Topper. Jishan Hyatt is the founder and CEO of Topper.com, one of the leading edtech companies in the K-12 segment, founded in 2013. Topper is replacing the traditional after-school coaching and tuitions in India with high-quality live classes and machine learning adaptive practice tests, and instant chat with tutors for Q&A. With Topper, Jishan aims to make learning personalized for the 350 million students in India. That's a big ambition, great. 15 million students today use Topper to supplement their school learning and learn better every day. Jishan is graduated from IIT Bombay in 2005 with a graduate degree in civil engineering. Welcome to the chat, Jishan.
Thank you, Durga. Good to be here.
Okay. All right, so let's get started. We have a good number of folks. Surprised we have 1,000 folks here, which means we have to meet our limit. So let's get started with our discussion. Just a warm up. I think the importance of technology has always been there in every area that the citizens have been participating, as students in schools. But the actual need and where it's important, I think, is realized in the last 6 months. Before we talk about what it is for current academic year, would like to take your point of view on the pre-pandemic scenario and would like to hear your observations. The question to you, Ryan, for the past few years, could you share your general observation about the level of technology adoption in institutions?
Sure, Durga. I'm happy to take that question. Once again, thank you so much for having me here. Thanks to AWS, to Amazon, and it's wonderful to be on the panel with Zishan and working with Topper. And firstly, as we begin, I thank God Almighty, my Lord and Savior Jesus, for this opportunity to be here to speak with you all. And also, I do hope that all of our participants on this call, during these tough times, are remaining safe and healthy, and we pray that good health for all of their families as well. Well, Corona has been a very interesting and also a difficult time for many. The whole world has faced several challenges. And we've been talking about the importance of technology in education and how technology is going to modify or accelerate the impact of education in schools around the globe. And we've seen it, to take a priority in many conversations, in many education conferences. Education and technology sometimes were thought of as two separate things. But during this Corona time, they've all merged together and very dependent on each other. Before the pandemic hit, there would be schools, educators who would think technology would be just having a smart board in a classroom. Some people would say that having a Wi-Fi enabled campus, you are a very high-tech institution. So different people had different metrics of technology. For some, having a television rolled into a classroom during a lesson to watch a video was, technology at its best. And not very long ago, even when I was in school, we had TV sets in our classrooms coming in to watch a fun video. But technology has evolved. And I would say our students are evolving even faster. And we as educators need to keep up with our students, because we need to engage with them at their level, meet their need. And at this time, when the pandemic hit and lockdown hit all of us, it came for many and most, I would say, at a big surprise. And that was a big, big challenge. And so over the years, while many would have thought technology is important, but maybe we did not give it that much thought as to how do we embed and integrate technology as part of our day-to-day education, day-to-day outreach, and day-to-day engagement with our students, but also involving our teachers and our parents, all of the various stakeholders, bringing together the curricula, the content, and engagement on one platform. And so that left a bit of a gap when the pandemic hit all of us.
Yeah, I think you very well said. I think the Wi-Fi and smart board at that time were actually high tech. In fact, if you're watching if you're using an iPad or a phone before the sessions, as a student, it is like, why are you wasting time? Why don't you go back to school or do some homework? So that's how it is to be. Zishan, what are your thoughts? Especially you being a technology company and passionate about education as a whole. Could you just talk about Topper and what you've seen so far until pandemic?
Yeah. So we started building Topper in 2013. Now, as Ryan said, technology, when you use the word technology, it covers a very, very broad spectrum. At the very basic end of it, digitization can mean technology. Just like making physical stuff digital, just like a scanned copy is also technology, right? But that digitization also improves distribution. Now you can, instead of having one book copy, you can have 100 digital copies. It dematerializes things. Instead of having a big stack of papers, it can come down to like one small file. So small steps like basic digitization can have multiple effects in subsequent steps. Now, if you keep multiplying those steps, and you add digitization, then you add personalization, you can increase distribution. So all these things compound and create a very, very different and unique experience. Now, we've been lucky to cover this journey, starting from digitization all the way to student personalization using complex machine learning, complex AI, etc., in the last 7 years. Now, this journey has been possible because of two fundamental things. One, devices have become more and more accessible to many Indians. And two, our data costs have remained fairly low compared to rest of the world. Now, these two fundamental factors, combined with, of course, capital coming into the sector, good teams solving these problems, etc. Pre-pandemic, we were at a stage that was significantly different from, let's say, 2013 or 14 or 15, right? In 13, 14, 15, there were barely any tools to learn online. Online learning meant a very narrow set of experiences and products. But by 2019, you had a lot of options, you could cover a lot of use cases, etc. And then early this year, with the lockdown, everything that was created in the last 5 years just got accelerated, right? So the adoption for everything that was created in the 5 years just went through the roof. So yeah, like you said, you're no longer accused of wasting time on the phone, because now your phone is your school, your tuition is on the phone, everything on phone is now super important.
Yeah, you're right. And Jishan, I think one thing you talked about digitization. Can we also say digitization also helped to reduce the weight of school bag?
I'll leave that to Ryan, actually. What do you think, Ryan? Have you mandated no textbooks yet in school bags?
Yeah, we do have reduced number of textbooks even before the pandemic. For our early learners, our children in Montessori and primary. But beyond just the weight, I think with digitized content, it's more engaging, and so the content can come alive in many ways, rather than just having to read text and just look at pictures. Those pictures can actually come alive in animation and become almost more. It's easier to understand for the children. But yeah, the phones. There was a time, I would say, that even schools and teachers would reprimand the students to say, you're not allowed to have your mobile phones in school and in class. But today, I think more than 90% of all online classes are run. The teacher is on the mobile and the student is also on the mobile. And to the fact that even parents are now giving their mobile phones, and sometimes it's a fight between the family members on devices. Earlier, the fight would be on who gets the control of the TV remote, but now I think it's the fight of all of the smart devices and who's using most of the Wi-Fi network at home.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's more about how we as a community kind of adapted ourselves to this new world, while learning is critical, and while there are some hiccups in between, but how do we actually adapt to be able to get to the new norms and be able to do it? I think that's one thing we'd like to know more about it from you later. But I also would like to know, Ryan, from you. I think you're one of the group of institution. I was reading, some of the notes in the internet earlier. I think that these institutions have actually used technology even before pandemic. It's not just for this adoption of this. Could you talk more about, Ryan Group of Internationals Group, the technology adoption pre-pandemic one? Was it like a new, or is it just, or has it been an easy transition for you?
So I would call it an accelerated transition. So there were things that were happening pre-pandemic and happening for a good number of years. I would say, at the beginning of the decade, from late 2010, 2011 onwards, there was a very focused approach on how do we integrate different types of technology, software, hardware, content, bringing it all together. And we've been running various pilots across our schools and our network of schools. And so, we have a parent app, we have a student app, by way we used to communicate transfer information, assignments, homework, content, all of that was already happening. And so when schools and the all of the various established, we were all in lockdown. We were very, I would say, it was easier. We were one of the fortunate ones. It was easier for us to completely transition online because Durga, let's remember that the announcement of the lockdown was pretty much all of a sudden for many of us, for most of us, I would say, and it was on a Sunday evening. And when many people thought, and especially educators, thought that Monday we will be able to go back to our schools, but from Monday onwards we were on a lockdown. So students didn't have their textbooks, teachers didn't have their books, they didn't have access to any of their material, which they would normally use to teach students. Suddenly, all they were left with was, I just have this thing at home that possibly has an internet connection or doesn't have that great of an internet connection. But it was, I would say, a challenge, and I really, really commend all of our teachers and staff of all of our Ryan schools, because everybody took ownership and the responsibility upon themselves. Because during this pandemic, everyone had to relearn, had to unlearn a set of skills, learn some new skills, and had to familiarize themselves with technology. So you would have very senior teachers, very senior principals who would, maybe before pandemic were challenged with even using email. But now suddenly they have to run an online class. And it's not just that, okay, you can be familiar or be tech savvy, but it requires a different skill set to run a class online, manage kids online, different age groups, and also keep them engaged, for the entire lesson. When they are not in front of you, how do you keep them engaged and keep the lesson interesting? And so that whole process required a lot of training, and we very quickly focused on a plan on how do we transition, how do we train all of our staff, and we did that in late March and early April. And then we said, we don't have a perfect system, but you know what, let's get started and we will learn along the way. And I really, really want to commend not only our teachers at all our Ryan schools, but I would say the teachers across the country and across the globe, and especially the teachers in India, I would say, and many of who have joined this webinar. It's been a big challenge for them. Not only they have to learn a new set of skills, but they also had to be teachers through the day. They had to be mothers through the day. They had to be wives to their families. So they had to manage their home, manage their class, and it was a challenge. So I really commend each one of them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Ryan. I think one thing you said about how in India the teachers are going to be different with the way that the things start from 6 a.m. to the night 9 p.m. and the challenges in preparing for the next lecture plan or a class plan is different from how they need to prepare. And in spite of it, throwing these kind of things are going to be add even little more challenges there. So in fact, I think on those kind of challenges happening, Zishan, I want to ask you this question. So you've been envisioning as to how technology is going to help education, and to either improve the student outcomes in one way or the other. But when you kind of came across this pandemic situation, how did your team kind of think differently, and what do you think that certain things are required? Like, for example, blackboards. We don't have blackboards, and teachers have trained years of training on how do we actually communicate and teach on blackboards and the classrooms. How did you kind of think differently on this, and could you walk us through those learnings?
Sure. So yeah, we've been building technology for education for the last 7 years. At the start of pandemic, I think the first thing that hit our mind for the first 1 week was just the safety of our colleagues and overall how to figure out working from home, because for several years you've only worked from office, collaborated because you were in the same office, and now you have to collaborate remotely and continue working. So the first 1 week at the time of pandemic hitting all of us and lockdown hitting all of us was that Then over the next 3-4 weeks, we all came together to think through everything that we thought through in the last 6 years, that we built from a student's point of view, and then take that and rebuild it from a teacher and school's point of view. So we thought about content that was built for the student. Now the same content needs to be built for the teacher. User experiences, interfaces for the student, the same need to be built for the teacher and the schools. So we took everything that we built, ripped it apart, and then put a new platform together, literally in almost 60 to 75 days, that was centered around a school and centered around a teacher. And with that, and once we launched that, we kept doubling down on it and continue to build it. Of course, nothing is perfect when you build it in 60 days, right? Like it came with its own challenges, but I think it was awesome to see so many schools come on board, especially Ryan Group, and continue to use it till today to run the schools. I think it has been, I mean, this has been on a roadmap for at least 3 years now, right? To build a school-centric platform that can unify your after-school learning with in-school learning, right? These have been two disjoint sets historically. Schools can't figure out what children do in tuitions and coaching classes. Tuitions and coaching classes have no idea what schools are teaching, right? So it's a disjoint set. Now, this has been on a roadmap to unify these two sets of data or sets of experiences into one single continuous platform. But the pandemic really helped us accelerate those plans and really ship out what was required to achieve that. And I think today, with almost 8 months of hindsight, I can say that the way it has shaped up both the in-school learning and it combining with the after-school learning, I think it is a very, very promising position that we are in today.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you, Jishan. Appreciate that. I think that's a commendable job. So I do have a lot of questions coming up. I would like to take them, but before that, Ryan, I just want to ask you a question about the current academic year. Having seen such fast pace and accelerated growth on it, are there any other highlights that you want to call out from the current academic challenges, or how we actually take the learnings and how those can help the audience now?
There are many learnings, and I think for us it's just the beginning. When the pandemic hit us and lockdown was upon us, many thought of this period lasting only maybe into the summer. Many thought, yes, we're in the month of March, April, May, June, probably post summer we'll restart normal school. Summer came and went, and then we said, okay, maybe after the monsoons. And then, now we are towards the end of the year of 2020. Why do I state this is, for some, they just deferred the process of planning, implementation, execution of something new, because they thought that this situation is just going to blow away, and it's just going to pass, and we'll go back to something what we knew. Go back to how things were. Nobody wanted to, come to reality and accept the reality and the new normal. Everybody's talking about the new normal. But I would say, for us as institutions and schools and educators, I think I would say this period has brought us closer to our students, not further. While yes, our physical classrooms, we do miss the personal interaction with our children, with our students, and especially for us, all of our schools and campuses across the country. Well, it is the students that bring life to them. They're the ones who bring the joy, the energy into the schools. Otherwise, they're all empty buildings. But I think during this time, it has brought us closer to our students, because we've been able to adjust our timetable, our scheduling, to be more personalized. So our students are actually getting more personalized, more individual kind of a focus during this time. I think another learning, even for parents, is for many, I think this was the first time that they are actually having to sit with their children, maybe through the whole day of school. Maybe before they did not know so much as to what did they learn in school, or what kind of homework they have to do, because, well, for a lot, children would go to school, come back, go to tuitions, and the days and the months and the grades pass by. But during these months, I think it is also a wonderful time for parents to actually sit with their children, understand, support them, and just help them out. I think it has brought families together. But I think it is the new skill set of how do we engage our children. That has been a big learning. And the role of a teacher. For me, I would say the value of a teacher has only grown, because previously, I've heard people say that technology will reach a particular point where the importance of a teacher or the need of a teacher will diminish. I, for one, am a strong believer that no one can replace the teacher, because the role a teacher plays and has played in many of our lives has been so critical, integral to our upbringing. The role of the teacher may change and has changed during this time. So the teacher is no longer just the source or the pure source or the only source of information. But I think the role of a teacher has really transitioned to being that guide, and also clearing doubts, queries, questions, bringing clarity into the minds and the learning of our children. So the role of the teacher has changed. And I think it's all for the better, because all of this learning is not a quick fix. I would say, at least for me, for us, for our team, and I would really encourage for all the educators, is that to take the learnings during this pandemic and see how can this then be implemented once hopefully we go back to our normal school times and our classrooms and meeting our children in person. But there would be a level of engagement, I think, that we have learned from. And I would also say creativity, giving room for our children to be more creative, that has increased. But yes, during this time, I think technology has only brought us closer.
Thanks, Ryan. I think one thing I totally agree with you on, the value of the teacher has only grown, absolutely. And technology will always be that enabler in giving a better outcomes that teacher and a student or a learner can take and then get improved on that. So thank you. And by the way, on the parents part comment that you made, I'm one of those parents. Now I spend more time with my kid, which I'm quite happy about. So thank you for calling it out. It's just that I need to find little breaks in between and then find it, which is okay, and which is what I think I would want to take. Okay, Zishan, there's a lot of questions which I want to pick up, but before I do it, there's one question I want to ask you. When we're talking about the digitization and using the technology to get the learning much closer to both teacher and the student, there's also a question about the security and the privacy of it. Could you talk more about it now that we are living in this digitized world, at least for this year?
Right. Look, with every single good solution, you will always come with some amount of concerning solutions, right? Like that's true for pretty much everything. In case of children, it becomes even more sensitive. And the level of sensitivity ranges from how much screen time is the right screen time, all the way to security issues and basically security issues. So I think it's a constant challenge. We just can't ignore this fact, and you have to constantly invest in solving for that. Right at the start, we were all hacking together solutions. Somebody went with some video conferencing provider, somebody else went with some other video conferencing provider, and these are video conferencing solutions that are built for adult business meetings and not really for student-teacher interaction, right? So it offered different kind of freedom, assuming these are adults and business people talking to each other, right? what you can post, what you can't post, what can be your name, what can be your picture, moderation, etc. That was a quick fix, but not the ideal fix. I think eventually over the last 6 months, we are seeing several solutions evolve that are more secure, that allow for content moderation, that allow for privacy, that don't let outsiders step in, that don't let you impersonate others, that don't let you spam others or abuse others. So I think all these small features, like it can be a very small feature of content moderation, but it is very important because how that affects the entire class, and if somebody is bullied in the class, how that affects that person's psyche for the rest of the year, super important, right? And also, this is a platform that has been made available for the first time to the kids. Whatever bullying happened in the class, right? So there was only a certain extent to which you could go because you're physically in the same space. Now suddenly online bullying is a completely different space. So it opened up different avenues. So it definitely needed some new thinking and new solutioning. And I think we've all come together to get those solutions in place.
Yeah, thank you, Jishan. I think one thing I would say as a host, maybe I will just, now I'm going to express my opinion as well. Is that, I think if human race has the choice, we probably would have taken a little more time for us to adapt ourselves to that new changing environment. I don't think anybody had a choice, but still, because we're passionate about learning and we care about our kids and the students' future, so we found every possible way using the technology to be able to continue that learning. During that process, as you said, I think these questions are important questions to ask, both as parent, teachers, or educators, and technology companies like you and us, to be able to see what is the right thing to do, and where the parental controls, where the privacy needs to be there, how do we do and communicate things. I think unless you start doing it, you would not know what to be done and what not to be done. I think this is the only starting time where it will only get better about how this transparency is going to increase and how we're going to maintain that the healthy environment where everybody's going to be having a very healthy and learning environment.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me, I'm going to go to a few questions which the audience have, and I don't want to wait for more time. So I don't know whether this question is really something that you could answer, Jishan, but how to take a FAIR test, and how can we get that type of question bank? I'm not sure the question. FAIR test. I'm not sure it's referring to an open book based testing, but
yeah. So I don't know what it is referring to, if it is referring to a new sort of testing, given that we are all remote and we all have access to books on our side, elder brother peeping from behind the screen, Google in the second tab, right? So you now have access to all the information. So maybe testing itself will sort of tweak itself and change itself and go more conceptual rather than just what testing was in the older classroom, where you were supposed to solve a problem and get to a decimal point. So I don't know how testing is going to evolve in this situation, but whatever happens, I think it'll happen for the better, because I personally feel that open book testing is better. Also, by the way, much more challenging. Don't underestimate open book testing. At least all the courses where I had open book testing in the college, I was like severely challenged. So I think it'll evolve to a new form. We've seen changes in every single thing, right from concept learning to practice to asking doubts. Even testing will evolve.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Durga, if I can just just add two cents to this. I think we as educators, this is a big challenge, but I think it's a very interesting challenge, because many a times we talk about our education system and about rote learning and everything, and try to beat it down. It's actually, from my view, it's not about what we teach and how we teach. but I think it's at the end point is how we assess. And I think, part of what Zishan is saying is that it's not just about how we assess, right? But it's how do we actually, what kind of questions are we asking the children? Are we just asking, define, explain, what is the formula? What is the meaning? This is all based on memory. But I think now it's really challenging all educators to say, how can we come up with questions which actually evaluate a level of understanding and not just memory? So I think that's a very interesting challenge for all of us. And I hope that this is something that will evolve into even post-pandemic, that when we actually go into normal schooling and normal testing and exam time, that we change our testing.
Yeah, right. I think assessment is going to be one thing I think is going to be evolving a lot, especially when you don't have invigilation or proctoring. That could be one more way to look at, what does that FAIR test look like? Thank you for providing those inputs. There's one more question which, Ryan, I want to ask you. What will be the long-lasting impact of these digital classroom on general school or colleges once they go back to their physical classrooms?
Okay, so this is something that we all are thinking about as to what's going to be post resuming of normal classes of some sort, right? I personally believe, and my team doesn't like me voicing this out too often, but I think for us, we need to be prepared for a more blended approach, a blended way of learning. When we say resuming physical classes, resuming normal classes, truly, I think the new normal might be a little different to what we were used to and what we were maybe comfortable with, because it's something that we have been practicing for years and years and decades. But I think it's about how does the classroom and the whole learning really changes. And I think the role of technology, again, it's going to be an enabler. And very simply put, in a very practical sense, I think, standardized content, enriched content that is available for students for asynchronous learning will be a great support for students. Machine learning, AI-enabled testing will just bring home personalized learning for students at every grade. And I think that is something that technology will really play a part, even when we go back to physical classes.
Yeah. If I may add mine here, I think all your technology is only as good as the adoption. You can have the most advanced modules ready, but if they're not adopted and not used and not practiced over, it's pointless. Now, what the pandemic has done is it has taken people across age groups. Like my niece is 5 years old and her class teacher is 60 plus. They've taken both of them, unlikely candidates for a video conference or for a tech interaction, and trained them over 6 months, force trained them over 6 months to use technology. Now, this forced training of entire India, or actually entire world, across all age groups for a digital interaction has made them super amenable for adoption of any new tech that gets delivered. So now whatever you want to create and deliver, it will get used. So I think that is a fundamental change that we're going to see.
Yeah, right, agree. And Ryan, to your point, I would always like to go back to what it was in 2020 February. But yes, I wish it is that easy. I think it is going to be that blended model. I agree, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. So there is one question, maybe I think Zishan, this is for you. What, according to you, is the best way for teachers to keep up with the various trends in the e-learning?
I think the best way is to try and be the student, or try and so students are naturally going to be, one, because they are younger, they're going to be curious, and two, because they are seekers and not givers, they are trying to keep looking for new things, right? So students by default are going to seek, and because of their age, they are very curious. So curious seekers is what a teacher wants to be. And if they get into that mode, I think they will automatically keep up with all the trends, etc. Now, there's a parallel analogy I give within my team, right? So I tell all my product managers who are actually the creators of product to be the users, right? You will only realize where your shortcomings are or what needs to be created only if you use it. And when you even if you use it for 20 minutes a day, you are going to create great products. So creators need to be users first. Similarly, givers need to be seekers first. So I think that's the best way to keep up with the trends and requirements.
Okay. And Ryan, do you have anything to add on top of it?
I think for a good teacher is always a good student. And I think it's just being that open-minded person to take on learning continuously and to take in best practices, to actually wanting to learn. I think that will just enable educators to improve their technical skills and the ability to teach more effectively online.
Yeah, right. And just to add, I think so far how the learning for anybody, including the profession of teaching, has been in certain form and has been that for so many decades, I would say. And suddenly this is like kind of shown that in everybody, and there's no exception that everybody has to go through this digital learning, right? Yeah, thanks. Jishan, you actually said a very good, interesting point. One about the devices are accessible more to the people nowadays, and bandwidth costs have come down. But I do have one question, which said, what can we or government to do lower the barrier to entry for digital learning? I think there are still some segment of folks, who may not have as much luxury of accessing to digital learning. Any point of view from your side on that?
Actually, look, honestly, I'm a believer. I'm in the camp where I think that government really can't intervene at an individual level and enable something, right? It's not possible for the government to hand over devices. It's not possible for the government to distribute devices or make data free, etc. Whatever they do, it has to be systematic. Even if they do something like that, by the time you start at 100 and come down to the last level, you're going to be left with like very, very few. The penetration is super low. Everything is lost in the flow. So I think it has to be, government interventions have to be systematic and very, very long term. They just can't. At our size of the country, you can't have a knee-jerk reaction that can enable something. So luckily, we've been in this era of low data costs for several years now. I think it's a way, and with Geo coming, it has come down even lower. Even pre-Geo, we were at a reasonably low data cost country compared to, several other European countries, African countries, even South Asian countries. So that has been one thing. The other thing I think has been, at least we've not been stifled with high import duties on handsets that made devices unaffordable, right? Like a great phone, you can get a great phone for 3,000, 4,000 rupees that can pretty much run any state-of-the-art software, has processing power that is super high. So I think these two things, I think, should be kept as is and continue to be in that space. Reverse intervention can harm us, right? Like if you increase data costs, spectrum getting auctioned, right? Like for that brief period, the 3G spectrum was pretty high, and we missed those 3-4 years of even further growth that could have happened, but I think the 2G and 4G have been fairly good eras. So just keep data costs low, keep phones free flowing structurally. That would be my take here.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So Ryan, I think there's one question which came up on these learning outcomes. So is the learning outcome same with the online classes as it was with the offline classes? How do you evaluate it? How do you assess?
So I think measuring the outcome, I don't think anybody has resolved that part yet. I think it's we're still early in our journey, and refers back to one of the first questions that we were talking about in this webinar. It is about fair testing and understanding how do we deliver and administer those tests. And so for us, we need to actually still learn a lot about how to make our online classes, our virtual classes, as effective as possible. Give access to content to children that will give them the freedom And also, I just want to take a step back to one point where Zishan was talking about, bullying in class and online bullying and all that. And I would say that, one other part is for students who would maybe in a normal class be backbenchers. Today technology has been a great leveler, has made all children, it's been a great leveler for all kids. And I think it's a journey for teachers that they need to really skill themselves, improve, learn something new on how to deliver more effective online classes. And I think it's up to the educators to devise mechanisms and parameters on how do we assess the outcome. Whether the children are learning or not learning, I think and what they're learning is yet to be seen. But I think we as educators need to provide the opportunity, the access, the content, and the platform to enable them to improve their learning.
No, absolutely. I think this is a very big point, Ryan. Traditional classrooms are designed in rows, right? So when the teacher is teaching, you have the first bencher, second bencher, and despite your interest, the last bencher is at some disadvantage compared to the first bencher. But now suddenly in the online world, you're speaking to the teacher directly, right? Like it's a classroom for one. I'm the only student in your class, and I'm 1.5 feet away from you, irrespective of how many other kids are there. At least my distance to my teacher is only 1.5 feet. So it's a very, for the first time, it's a very fundamental shift. We may not recognize it, but that's how online classes are now designed.
Yeah, right. Great. Thank you so much. This is a question about, again, the testing. MCQs should be designed properly and more formative testing should be done. I think it's more of a statement, but not a question. But anything to observe here?
I don't disagree.
Well, it's totally possible to design, very good MCQs. MCQ as a format is not limiting. It's not like, oh, because this is an MCQ question, we can't test certain things. Sure, there is, in the long form, you can, you can check for elegance, you can check for other things, but it's totally possible to design great MCQs. Yeah. What it does is, see, MCQ gives you multiple points of checking. So in a long form, I can test you 10 times only, right? 10 questions in an hour, etc. With MCQ, I can go till 30, 40. So there are both pluses and minuses with MCQ. And I've seen some very, very challenging MCQs. I've seen some very dull, long form questions. So it's not a limitation of the format.
Okay. All right. So there are other questions which I have. I have so many questions, and all this time I've been taking only those questions coming from the audience, and I don't think I'll be able to complete all the questions, but I'm just picking up questions randomly and asking you. But before we actually ask a few more questions, I want to just pause and pick my couple of questions which I want to ask you.
Sure.
Ryan, you talked about the new normal a few times. It's not going to be the same as earlier, but at the same time, what does it mean for new normal for teacher, educator, or student in those three buckets?
So I think the new normal, there are many aspects that are the same for students, teachers, and parents. But I think there are some aspects that we need to accept and identify that what would be different for each category. Just like I think the new normal is when we go out, we got to wear our masks and make sure that we use sanitizer and improve our hygiene and hand wash and all of that. But I think it is, again, coming back to what is the new normal, what is a school, how a class is administered, how learning happens, where and also when learning happens. Because I think during this pandemic, also the question of when, it was for many, while we identify, yes, access, network connectivity issues, hardware, all of those were challenges. But I think for some, even timetabling and scheduling was a challenge, because it was a balance not only between just the teachers, right? When you're in school, you only have to manage your resources, which are your teachers, and schedule them accordingly, because the children are all there, and you just need to reallocate your teachers. But during this time, you had to allocate your teachers to your students, and also the parents, because parents also working from home. And then when the unlock started happening, parents are no more at home all the time, and so all of that started changing. But I think going forward, again, I really hope that some of the learnings of this lockdown we take with us, and actually unlock our thinking and unlock our approach of what it means to deliver an effective class and have a enriched and engagement experience for our children, for our students in our classrooms and our schools. When I mean it is not just looking at the syllabus, not just looking at the curricula, not just looking at the exam timetable and ticking boxes and saying done, 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 done. Right now, we are actually, most educators are concerned, and rightfully so, as to what are our students learning. Are they learning well? Are they understanding well? Will they be able to cope, not just about in class, but in exams, in assessments? And what about next academic year? Will they be able to cope up with next year's curricula? So it is, I think, the whole approach of just output based, more outcome. We've heard these buzzwords, right? But it really forces us to reimagine even how we plan our lessons, our whole, come back to basics of our lesson planning, how do we identify good resources that we can use in our classrooms. I think it is actually coming back to basics of retraining and relearning what it means to deliver effective classes going forward. Even if, Durga, we go to our classes as we did in February 2020, but I think the level of engagement and the effectiveness of the delivery with our students and just helping them learn better, I hope that those learnings we carry forward.
Yeah, I think the students adapt faster, but I think it's the adults like us and teachers and parents, we have to adapt along with the students for these circumstances. So Jishan, on the same lines, but I also want to ask you this question. Innovation is a key thing. I think the way that we've been using technology 5 years back versus now is continuously changing, and we are finding new ways of improving the student outcomes, or or doing those remote proctoring, or doing those adaptive tests. So from your point of view, what is that new normal going to be, and how do you think this technology is going to help future, through your company or in general?
I think the new normal is going to be somewhere in the blended zone. There are great advantages of in-classroom learning. There are some shortcomings of in-classroom learning. There are great advantages of online learning. There are some challenges of online learning. So both have their pros and cons. So I think now that we've seen both, we've seen that thing completely, we've also seen this thing exclusively. We can't even blame that we never got the chance to see pure online learning, right? That dream also has been accomplished. I think what we will do, or what everyone will do in general, is take the best of both and then try and combine. So some things, like for example, a teacher is very necessary for empathy, a teacher is very necessary for discipline, a teacher is very necessary for guidance and coaching and overall shaping and nudging you and pushing you in the right direction. So that will continue to be there. But world-class content can be brought digitally to you. A teacher does not have to be the content provider also. The content can come from outside. The discipline can come from within. So you take the best of both worlds and combine a experience that is sort of blended. It brings best of both worlds together, leaves behind all the shortcomings or cancels out the shortcomings, and it creates a new experience. And I think it's totally possible, because with the continuity of learning at school, at home, devices being available everywhere, etc. I think that will happen. Yeah, so I think the future is a blended option, and we are going to take away our learnings from both the lockdown as well as in-school learning that we've had experience with, and then create something that is.
Yeah, thanks. So I think I was just going through the other questions as well. Some of the questions which we cannot answer now, we will certainly address them after the session is over. But there are a few interesting things that folks have called out during these online classes. I mean, there are a few things which we need to adapt from a going into tier 2 and tier 3 kind of market, cities, how certain section of people would still not be able to go into the school. There is some areas to be improved. There are a few interesting things as well. Introverts or the shy and introvert folks, students actually were finding it increasingly better and engaging with these classrooms. That's one. And second, the teachers are actually spending more time with these individual kids, are able to interact with almost every one of them, even if it is not once, but be able to focus on things that are really important and focus and spending those time there. Those are some of the areas. There are some really interesting comments that people made here. I cannot comment all of them right now, but there is one thing which I want to ask you before we closing it from each of you. Is there a shift required from a teacher-centric to a learner-centric model, or is it already there?
I am not sure if we had a teacher-centric model even before. I mean, what is a teacher-centric model? Yeah, sure, there is one teacher and there are multiple students in the class, but I don't think life is that black and white that you can either have a teacher-centric model or a student-centric model only. I don't know. Ryan, this is a tough one. I'm passing it to you.
Very happy to take that one.
This question. Yeah,
very happy to take that one. I think from our view, everything that we do, we have to keep the child at the center. The child has to be at the core, at the heart of whatever we do. I mean, we exist for the children. We exist because to not only to just give them the best education, but I think it just be part of their journey when they come to us in nursery and then when they leave us in grade 10 or 12. It's that relationship, it's that bond, it's that association with a human being. And so, yes, I totally agree. It is not about teacher-centric or child-centric alone, but I think for schools and educators, I think we are there for the children. And whatever we do, and in terms of the new normal, and as Zishan also agreed with me about blended learning and all of that, I think it is how do we ensure better learning, more effective learning for our students? Because that's why we are here. We are here for them.
Exactly. I think very well said, Ryan. I think it's always been like that, and it's depending on how you say it, but it's important to keep the focus back to the child and work backwards, and you will find the answers there. Yeah, thank you for giving that insight. So in the last 60 seconds, just one line from each of you before we close the event today. Yeah, maybe starting with you, Ryan.
Sure. Well, again, I really want to encourage all of the educators that are on the webinar, and I also want to encourage even the parents that are on the webinar. These times are very challenging for all, and it is very, very challenging for our students. While we are looking at the academic aspects and learning and curricula and all of that, I really want to encourage families to use this time to the best possible, because while we hope to go back to life as normal, I think that we will come to a point where we will miss this time when we were all together, because this is the most amount of time families have spent with each other and one another. And I really want to encourage families to really use this time wisely. And I would say even for parents, maybe you may have older children. Maybe as they grow older, they may not completely open up about just studies. And I'm just wearing off a little bit just from the co-curricular aspect and learning aspect, because I think it is important for us to look at mental health of our children, look at their who they are as people and as young adults and growing into young adults, and especially for all of the students who are in the higher grades and they're thinking about their board exams and they're thinking about their future. And I think a lot of them are grappling with hard questions and a lot of worry and a lot of anxiety as well. And it really calls upon us, to be there for our students, for our children together, and to be there as a community to come out of this stronger, better, post this pandemic. So that would be my closing remarks. And thanks once again for having me.
Thanks, Ryan. And Jishan?
Well, when we think of education, we think of student first, and we always think of the child. But actually, there are 4 key stakeholders here: student, the teacher, the parent, and the school. And all these 4 have very symbiotic relationships with each other, right? A teacher is connected to the student, but is also connected to the school. A school is connected to the parent and has to take responsibility for the both teachers. And so there is a very symbiotic relationship between these 4 blocks, right? And each cannot survive without the other, and each cannot speak just for themselves without speaking for others. So if you really want to shape up a child's future and really want to shape up their learning, we have to, whenever we are creating solutions, we have to think about all these 4 stakeholders and what is driving them to do what they want to do, what do they want to achieve and build something. So I think it's important to think about all these 4 stakeholders, and everyone is doing their best, I know, yeah, I hope that we continue to do our best and keep this in mind.
Thank you, Jishan. Really appreciate both of you sharing your views and your experienced lessons as well. For audience, thank you so much for joining. There will be a poll will be sent to you, a feedback form, and also a recording will be shared with you as well. I think overall, if you understand, I think the role of technology in the current academic or the future, it's continually going to evolve. It's not going to go away, but it is about how do we leverage it and how do we efficiently use it. And thank you so much for sharing these details with us. So thanks once again, and stay safe.
Thank you, Durga. Thank you, Ryan. It was great.
Thanks guys. Thanks everybody. God bless. Stay safe.
Thank you.